Okay, so the painting we're going to start today is going to be a limited palette or a dead palette painting. We're adding an extra color to this, which is going to be Titan Buff. So we're going to start with titanium white, Titan Buff, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue. We'll not use any other pigments aside from these. So the first thing you want to do is lay out your palette and structure it so that it's something that you get accustomed to doing. It's a quick way to access your colors. Eventually you don't even have to really look at your palette. The idea is that once you are very comfortable with the way that your palette is structured, you always go back and put the pigment in the same location, and you just get accustomed to seeing it in that location. So going from cool to then warm to then cool. So always keeping that reference of warm and cool relationships. Okay, so these are all the pigments that we will need. To start off this painting, we're going to do first a rub out technique, lay-in. So we're going to start off with a larger brush. And we're going to coat this surface with your sienna. So what you'll need is fabric cloth. In this case, we're going to start very lean. So we're going to go to our Gamsol and keep your pigment to about that consistency. Okay, so it's semi-transparent. It's not fully transparent like that. It's kind of a semi-transparent. And we're going to coat the entire surface. And you can make it a little bit more transparent, or you can make it like a mid-tone value. Typically we want to start with a mid-tone value and then be able to pull our lights and push our darks. So by just doing this, we give our surface a tone. So we're not starting off with just straight white for our canvas. In this case we're using Bristol board. Make a quick painting. And this process should take you about 5 to 10 minutes at most. Eventually it can take you a lot less time, but if it takes you 10 minutes to 15 minutes today, that's fine. So that's all we really need. Right, we have a value, so it's now essentially a toned canvas, and now we can start our sketch. So again, not going into the oils just yet, just going into our sketch. If I go into my Gamsol, I thin it out a little bit, start sketching out my composition. I'm going to be laying it out for a picture. So I want to look for that center line of the object, surface where it's sitting on, and the relationship of all of the objects in conjunction with that one, right? So the totality of my composition, see if it fits, see where everything is going to be located, as opposed to starting with one thing and then trying to figure out how they're all going to fit. So I think that by doing it this way, we start general, a general sense of the painting or the composition, and then eventually you get to more specific. So we're always working general to specific, and in this case we're starting off with a very quick lay-in in this rub out technique. So when I'm working this way, I want to work really fast. I want to get a general sense. It's like, imagine a sketch with a little bit more information. Now there are times where you can actually develop this to a very, very finished state in a monochromatic. but what we're doing today is going to be something quick so we can actually get into using the rest of our limited palette here. So my reds is going to be, I'm never going to be able to hit vibrant red. I'm going to make this my only red, and by selecting the right color, the right pigments next to these in a cool temperature, I'll be likely to get these to have the appearance of being red, but not be red. So make sure that you pay attention to your ellipses. One way to reference your ellipse is by striking your center line for your object, finding the general dimensions where it ends, where it's closest to you, so where it ends on the sides, where it's closest to you, and if I could see the back, I would give myself a mark for that so that I can strike my ellipse and keep it looking believable. Okay? I don't have to get into the very specifics of what this picture looks like, but each time I'm trying to correct it and improve my initial sketch. Cast shadows. And then the rest of these grapes are sitting back here. Just gonna clump them together. All right, so I think I got enough. Now with this rag, I can dip it in my Gamsol and just keep it sort of damp. You don't want to wipe out too much. And at this point I want to start with my lightest light. So on this, the light happens about here. I just keep spinning it to a drier area, take away less. And if I want to get very specific, switch to a round brush and use the brush to do the job. Don't try to force yourself to do something and struggle. Use the brush, let the brush do the work. So if I dry the brush, I can soften these edges and maintain a pretty decent sense of what this form is going to look like. Okay, so again, we're not trying to do a finished painting in this method. We're going to try to get a sense of the form, right? General light and shadow masses to see if I want to commit to this painting. And I made a mistake, so I'm not crazy about that. I'll go back to my large brush, remove it, go back, and then I can wipe out with my fabric that is still kind of wet, bunch it up a little bit. And just wiping out the light masses, right? And this is all for the purpose of getting a decent relationship of forms, decent relationship of lights and shadows, and a good underpainting. Sometimes I do this in acrylic so that it dries quickly, and then I can glaze on top. But you got to work a lot faster if you're using acrylic. And that's basically it. Continue the remaining portions. Again, don't get too specific, just separate your values, your forms, into light mass and shadow mass. On the grapes, have little highlights, and you can always push your darks a little bit more. But if you go too much, then that dark value, especially on something like this, since it's a white picture, something like this is going to need some more a different color or different pigment. So I see some of this green bouncing back into this. So if I add any more of this red, I'm gonna have a really hard time getting it out. So I only want to get it to be about that dark. If it's this dark and then some of that blends in with your other pigments that you'll put on top of it, that's fine. So for instance, there's a shadow here, but I wouldn't ignore this shadow. That's about as dark as I want to make this shadow. I just want to make sure that it's there and that I don't forget that it actually exists. And then work my way into the light mass. And if I like the way this is going, and it seems like something I can continue or begin to actually put some paint on, then go ahead and start. Alright, so obviously you can detail more, but there's really no point. The point is to get a general sense of the composition, general sense of the light and shadow masses and your proportions. So in this case, I'd probably make this a little bit larger, edit some of this stuff before I actually begin painting. And this is very forgiving. If I don't like any of it and I'm not crazy about this composition, I can just knock sections down and start again. Okay.